What's up guys, Chris the Greek Weeb here with another 4 Nights of the Apocalypse manga chapter review. And before we get into this chapter, which again was a pretty great chapter for this new series, I'd have to remind you to subscribe and hit the notification bell for updates on future videos, and like the video to let me know that you enjoy this content so I can keep this up. Also, I will continue to do these 4 Nights of Apocalypse videos for as long as I possibly can because I am really enjoying the series. And these most recent chapters are really good with helping building lore and theory crafting. So let's get into what happened in the previous chapter and what happened in this chapter. So in chapter 7, Percival, Donnie, and Sin get off the dragon's backbone and they try and do some hunting to see if they can get themselves something to eat. However, Percival, after finding a blocked passageway to a giant gorge, decides instead of going away from somewhere that's kind of sealed off by a bunch of boulders, he goes inside. He finds a bunch of bizarre mutated animals and plant life and discovers this character known as Nasian. And he is known as the Demon of the Gorge, and he does experiments on the creatures of that area. We also have Donnie and Sin meeting Dolores, who is a giant girl who seems to be worshipping the goddess race, along with 2 other fairies who saw Percival enter the gorge and led Donnie and Sin, along with Dolores, to go and try and find Percival. And the chapter ended with Percival getting captured after saving a fairy from Nasian. So with that said, let's start off with this chapter. Chapter 8, called Percival the Guinea Pig. And right off the bat, I'm just going to say this. I think that my theories from last time may have been wrong to an extent. But for now, let's just get into how this chapter began. The chapter starts off with Donnie's group heading to the gorge, led by Dolores and the fairies, saying that she herself blocked the entrance. And Percival said that it had the opposite effect on Percival. Well, obviously the guy has never been in the outside world for 16 years, so anything can catch his attention. Sin says that if anything happens to him, if anything happens to Percival, then it's his ass on the line. The 2 fairies with Dolores say that that Percival might not be worth searching for, due to the fact that Nasians might have gotten him in the first place. Dolores seems physically upset while Sin notices this. We then cut to Percival as he wakes up after being mysteriously knocked out in the last chapter, tied to a chair, the same chair that the fairy that was tied up at from the previous chapter. Wondering where his cloak and helmet are, we see Nasian come down the stairs basically saying that the drug he used, the Belladonna leaves, were supposed to knock him out for 10 hours, but Percival quickly bounced back. I mean, the guy took a big hit that was supposed to kill him, just leaving a scar, and him getting up soon afterwards. So, it's obvious that typical poisons or chemicals won't really affect him for very long. Plus, his hero type basically helps him heal insanely quickly, so it would stand to reason that Percival wouldn't have been knocked down for very long. Nasian says that he needs to keep his test subjects clean, and as Percival's asking for his cloak and his helmet, reiterating that he got them from his grandfather, Nasian looks at him and says that he burned everything else that Percival had on him, but the helmet and the cloak are actually pretty rare magic items, and that it would take quite a lot of force to destroy them. And Percival, like us, are surprised that these are in fact magic items. Nasian says never mind, and he jabs Percival with another drug. As we see, this obviously gets Percival a little lightheaded. Something is happening to him. Nasian says that he'll be back in an hour where the drug should take effect by then, but then we cut back to Percival as the drug had a very weird effect, making his hair just giant sized. I needed a bit of humor after Percival gets kidnapped, but seriously, this drug just made his hair bigger. Same shape, but just bigger. Nasian's honestly pretty curious about this, in that the results are something that he didn't expect. He didn't mix anything wrong, and he can accelerate his plan now he thinks he can accelerate plant and animal growth, which is honestly feeds us into what he might be doing. Percival's asking him what he's trying to do, and that he was doing mean stuff to that fairy. Nasian says that Percival got everything wrong. Yes, he was using him as a guinea pig, but the fairy did in fact invade his home and attack him first. so the fairy was only captured and turned into his guinea pig as a form of self-defense. But after biting his lip, Nasian says that Percival recovers fast so readily responds to his treatments. Percival talks about how his lips were dripping with blood, being like he bit the fairy, which would have played into my whole vampire theory. But no. With a sinister look on his face, Nasian says that Percival is the greatest guinea pig with blood dripping from his lips. So the blood was obviously from him biting his lips, not from biting that fairy. So that more or less kind of takes out the whole vampire theory. It kind of, at this point, I think this chapter basically disproves my whole Zeldris and Gilda child theory at this point. I get, whatever, it is what it is. But anyway, what Nasian says next is what really intrigues me. He says that all his life, whenever he gets excited, he would bite his lips. The more excited he is, the harder he bites down on them. And Percival says he should try and fix that habit. Nasian wipes his lips, saying that his sister says the same thing. As we cut back to Dolores and Donnie's group as they are running away from all the mutated and changed animals and plant life that inhabit the New Gorge. And this is where the fairies explain that this is all the work of Nasian. And his weird drugs and experiments. He says, we better work quickly because he's one hell of a villain and they better kick his ass or else Percival is in trouble, as Dolores, launching a earth attack onto the ground, says that he's not like that. It's not what Nasian's like at all, and to stop getting the wrong idea. Which plays into the theory that it most likely might be confirmed within the next chapter or two, that Nasian and Dolores might be siblings. And if that is true, and due to their different sizes, maybe they're both the children of King and the Anne. Now this is definitely not for sure, but this could honestly be pretty cool. I mean, King is a fairy, the Anne's a giant. What would happen if they had kids? Well, maybe one's a fairy and one's a giant. Or maybe one's a fairy-giant hybrid and one's just a fairy, or whatever. It is what it is. But this makes things interesting because even if this could honestly be true, that Nasian could in fact be one of the Four Knights of the Apocalypse, like I thought last chapter, instead of him being the child of Zeldris and Gilda, which this chapter pretty much just threw out and disproved right away, he could in fact be King's son. And he looks to be around the same age as Percival, if we can take size into account when it comes to the 7 deadly sins and the fact that he is a fairy. Though it's not confirmed yet, we don't see his wings. However, this could really help with the fact that he is in fact Dolores' brother, and they could be the children of King and the Anne. This could be a good way to tie into the story the earlier sins, because the Anne was the first sin that Meliodas met, and what better way to start off the story with finding these Four Knights of the Apocalypse and whoever could be the children of the sins than the children of King and the Anne, who the Anne was the first sin that Meliodas met, and this would honestly make a lot more sense and help retread some ground and give some form of familiarity to the people coming in from the 7 deadly sins. And this would be a nice little nod to be like, hey, remember when Meliodas met the Anne first? Well, Percival, the new protagonist, is going to meet the kids of King and the Anne. I could be looking way too much into this, but hey, I'm just excited to the fact that we might actually get to see the children of King of the Anne, because we only saw the children of Meliodas and Bond. So this will honestly be pretty damn interesting. We then cut back to the mushroom house where Nasian and Percival are. Percival apologizing for having him all wrong, but he really needs to go. And Nasian says that Percival can leave right after he gets this next mixture. If he doesn't measure it quite right, Percival might actually die from it. And Percival notices, why are you shaking? And why is he... Percival asks, why are you shaking? Why are you even doing this? Nasian then says that, I don't need to tell an outsider like you, but I've got a mission I absolutely need to fulfill. As he looks over and Percival is he's just gone. He escaped right away, grabbed his cloak and his helmet, saying that he's got his own mission to fulfill. He's got to find his dad and give him an ass beating for killing his grandfather. And then he's going to see the amazing sights of Britannia on this adventure, as he struggles to put on his helmet due to his hair still being enormous. Nasian says that Percival's power is just insane, and breaking the ropes like that, he doesn't have time to lose. So he whips out his two mini sword weapons, little daggers, one called Henbane and the other called Belladonna, as they seem infused with two types of magical power, and I'm not sure what they are, but I'm sure we'll get some sort of explanation soon. Nasian says he's not going to kill him, he just needs Percival to remain still. Percival wondering if that's magic. Again, his helmet plops off, and right when Percival's trying to put it on, Nasian strikes, and Percival quickly and pretty efficiently manages to counter every single attack and parry. As he continues to ask why Nasian's doing this, and Nasian just keeps saying that he doesn't need to know. Percival catches the next hit and says, "If you're in trouble, tell me. I can help you." Nasian's just like, "Help me?" That's just a total stranger like him. It's just a bare-faced lie. All I want is test subjects for this drug, as he keeps trying to hit Percival so he can stop moving. He says that he can't test it on himself. If he dies, he can't finish the drug or save the gorge. That they've talked enough. As Percival's helmet bounces off from his big hair and hits Nasian in the face, he crashes on his table, and the drug that he was working on flies into the air, and Percival catches it. Nasian, obviously very panicked, says, "Wait a minute. I won't lay a hand." He says he won't lay a hand on Percival anymore. Just let him have the bottle. It's almost done, or it should be done now even. Percival's like, "No, you'll just test it on someone else." As Nasian is about to say stop, Percival just straight up drinks the drug and gulps it down, much to Nasian's surprise, as he says, I'll just test it on myself instead, as the chapter ends. So, once again, we get another amazing chapter for the Four Knights of the Apocalypse. We get a nice little fight between Percival and Nasian, seemingly evenly matched, but with some weird, with the weird experiments that was done on Percival, he basically somewhat won the fight, and gained this drug that Nasian has been working on for I don't know how long. And honestly, another good chapter. I'm glad that we managed to get some sort of character, we got some glimpse into who Nasian might actually be. He was called the Demon of the Gorge, but he's most likely not a demon. He says he has a sister, and we have Dolores defending Nasian's actions, being like, "No, you guys just don't understand him, it's not like him at all." So, like I said earlier, these two could be siblings and possibly the children of King and Leanne. Nasian could actually be a fairy, and Dolores could actually be and Dolores is obviously a giant. The two weapons that Nasian uses, based on their names and how small they are, it might be possible that they were made from the bark of the fairy tree, like King's Chastiefol. That's just a huge leap in logic. I don't even think that's possible. But it would make sense if he was King's son, and King would just give him these weapons and stuff like that. But it's very possible with this really quick theory. Nasian says that he wants to save the animals and plant life in the gorge. He wants to save the gorge, and he's looking for something to increase plant and animal growth. So it's very possible that him, a herbalist, is actually using all these different drugs and other objects to try and find a way to heal what has been done to the animals. Maybe he was not directly responsible for this. Maybe something happened, like maybe the power of chaos affected this area in a weird way, or something happened to like corrupt or nearly bring the animals and plant life in that area to death, and Nasian feels like he should try and save them. Thus, maybe he was indirectly responsible for, while trying to save this animals and plant life, to create these weird monstrosities or berserker animals that we see in the gorge. Or maybe those animals were like that before he got there, and he was spending all of his time there testing stuff on passerby fairies or animals and plant life in that area, so we can try and find the right drug, the right mixture, to fix what has been done to them. This could show that Nasian, despite showing that he has a bit of might be a sadistic guy for the fact that he likes experimenting, to have like an actual heart of gold, caring for nature and the animals and plants, which would go pretty in tune with a fairy, since fairies have a pretty strong connection to nature, much like the giants, but they're overall pretty kind people. So it would make sense if Nasian was a fairy and the child of King, being that since he's King's child, he might feel like he has a responsibility to take care of any area like this. And Dolores, if she is in fact Nasian's sister, might feel responsible for keeping an eye on Nasian as he's doing all this, which could explain why she's pretty close to the gorge and why she kind of barricaded all those animals from plant life in there, along with Nasian. But that's really all I could really think of. Could Nasian be one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse? Possibly, but we just have no way of knowing. The 4th Knight of the Apocalypse, other than Tristan and Lancelot, which is definitely confirmed at this point, could in fact be the child of King and Leanne, or the child of Zeldris and Gilda. I don't care whichever one it is, as long as we get one of them pretty soon. If Nasian is in fact one of the first 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, other than Percival, then it would make sense because of one other clue. One of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse is called Pestilence. It's supposed to represent pestilence, disease. So, what if in fact Nasian represents pestilence, but the fact that he's a herbalist means that he's trying to cure diseases and stuff like that? It would fit pretty well. And if he is indirectly responsible for this, if we can call it a sickness, the sickness of the gorge, it would fit in well with him basically being, well, one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse to represent pestilence. But that's really all I can say to tie it to Nasian being one of the 4 Knights. He's a herbalist, he does drugs, try and cure diseases. It's obvious that the animals in plant life have some sort of disease or mutation. It could be because of Nasian, or Nasian saw this and he wants to try and fix it. But yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this chapter. Another great chapter for this new series. I am really enjoying it, and just something about starting a series from the very beginning and following it week by week, it just feels great, and I cannot wait to see how this story unfolds and all the answers we'll probably get for this little mini arc before we get to Leonis. But with all that said and done, what do you guys think of this chapter? Was it another good chapter? What do you think of my thoughts of Nasian being one of the 4 Knights of the Apocalypse and being the child of King and Leanne, along with Dolores being his sister, which could more or less confirm this theory? And do you think that Nasian was in fact responsible for all the stuff happening in the gorge, or do you think that this stuff happened before Nasian got there and he's just taking the blame for it as he is searching for a cure? Leave it down in the comments down below. And with all that said and done, I hope you guys have an awesome day.